Hello, thank you for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Art Cast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take on different topics that pop up from time to time. When one strikes out on this endeavor of communicating with visuals, we think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jersey Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger, a game designer and user experience designer. Hi, Jersey.
It only took 249 tries, but we had a nice, smooth intro.
Oh, whatever. The intro is normally smooth. It's there are some random fun surprises once in a while. A little bit of spice, and who knows? I don't know. That's funny. So what's going on today? We've got. Did you say already 200? You basically we're doing a little bit of math for us, right? Where it's like. There's been now 250. This is the 250th episode of the
Happy
show.
Anniversary.
Happy anniversary again. It's been over 7 years. We've hit an interesting big round number. 250. It's an interesting number. It's pretty big.
Yeah, it's a pretty big number. And so, we thought that for this episode to sort of have a more relaxed, celebratory tone. We would do our first ever Q&A. I don't think we've ever done Q&A, Rob. We've done episodes based on leaner feedback, like where they ask us a question and we ruminate on that question for a whole episode, but never one where it's like, here's like 15 questions from different people. Let's hash them out. And the other twist is that we're going to start by interviewing each other, right?
That's, yeah, where we tend to... Not tend to. I mean, it's pretty well established. We're topic focused. We try to, even if one of the leaners posts a question to us, it becomes this premise, and then we are going to use our approach to explore a premise, and that's inherently, I don't know, it's informed by us and our projects and the things we do. There was a long time where we did not mention our projects much at all outside of the things that were outside the podcasts because whatever, I don't know. We're funny that way, and then we decided to embrace that, and but it's never been the central focus to say, oh, okay, you Jersey Drozd as a creator, me Rob Stenzinger as a creator, let's ask each other stuff.
So we'll start by doing that, and then in the second half of the show, we're going to turn it over to questions that the leaners gave us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/leanintoart. So. Are you ready for the transition music, Rob? You ready to dive in?
I am ready.
Then, there it is. Thoughtful dancing.
I can't stop. All of a sudden, I was like, I'm going to contain it. I'm going to contain it this time. And it just starts, it gets bigger, It just fills my body with too much energy. And it's this time to move.
Just before we started, I almost regretted the fact that I had none of our Robotech tracks pulled up that we used to use for the transitions for so many years.
Yeah.
And then I thought, you know what? No, the Dragon Ball music's too good. We're staying with that. At least I'm not sick of it yet. So.
Okay.
Speaking only for me, and I doubt you are. Okay, I keep minimizing my windows.
I want to be tired of it, but I can't. So that's a strange situation to be in. All right. But it means, here we are. We're jumping in. Normally this is like where we go on the ground and explore a topic, and then we go, more theoretical later on. But nope, it's all questions. So, and this was your idea, Jersey. You were like, hey, what if we interviewed each other? I'm just really curious if you'd want to start. Throw a question out there.
You want me to start? Okay. So, This was fun for me to sit down this afternoon and think about some of these questions because, as some people may know who listen to the show, for a long time I did a podcast called Comics Are Great, and it was a straight-up interview show where it was me and, often one or two people, usually a interviewee who I would build a premise around, right? I'd look at their work and I would ask myself, what kind of core ideas do they seem to project, and how can I come at them and get them to defend those ideas? And it was always really fun discussions because it was like sort of getting to the nut of what made certain people tick, creative people in comics. So I have some similar questions for you, Rob. Also, I should preface this by saying that one of my favorite things in the entire world is when I meet somebody who is super passionate about a subject that maybe I have some passing interest in it, but I'm not as head over heels for it as they are. Like the example I used to use for a long time was a friend of mine who was like super into bikes. I'm like, yeah, bikes, they're great. You can get from here to there, and they don't use any, fossil fuels. That's wonderful. But he's like, no, you don't understand. And he started selling me on this passion for bikes. And like about a half hour, and I'm like, I kind of love bikes a lot now, you know. So, in that spirit, I have a question for you, Rob. And I don't think I've ever asked you this. Uh, Video games, you know,
Mhm.
for a lot of episodes now, we've been talking about how you made a game. You made a game, this-panda.com. You made guitarfretter.com.
Mhm.
Um, when we were hanging out in January of this year, we played a lot of video games. When I came to visit you before that, we played a lot of video games. And I'm curious if you can sell me on this thing. Like, I like video games. They're fun. I don't think about them enough that I want to make them. Um, what is it? Can you pin down like what the essence is about what makes them such a compelling art form that you would spend so much time and energy on them?
Hmm. I honestly don't think it's much different for any medium. That when you have, I guess, enough awareness for how to go about building a thing, that you were, I don't know, initially tempted to step into asking why and how and how do these pieces come together, and tuning into folks sharing that ideas about that work. It's I mean that I think that fits with a variety of interests that I have, where it goes from being arrested and fascinated and inspired to curious and delving into, and then finding a little grasp on being able to act within it. So when I first studied guitar, it was like that because of how music made me feel, and especially metal music, and then rewinding, back to like the first artistic pursuit I went into, which was drawing, and it's because of how Snoopy made me feel and how rockets going into space made me feel, and so I would draw that stuff. And I so in a way there's this huge selfishness to it, but then as I get older, it's like I want to be able to make a thing with that helps other people feel that feeling of this is fun and worthwhile and interesting and engaging. And so with games in particular, there was this combination effect of interests, and that was over time it was like looking at the door and crossing the threshold of like, yeah, I want to go in this area and make games. It looks like it combines all sorts of interests, and I really do think computers are a pretty fun, fascinating, useful tool as well. And I got into programming computers at a pretty young age, and so it just was like, oh my gosh, it combines everything, and somehow that combination in and of itself, that's exciting. And so that's what helped pull me into it. But then it's been a long slog as far as the making and putting games into the world, right? Where I mean, I really only finished like demos and half done stuff for a long time, and eventually started to actually finish stuff. And yeah, anyway, that's how does that
Well, I feel like
address your
that's a
question?
fairly straightforward and honest answer to the question, but I wonder if there's any post adulthood retrospective rationalization. I guess like another aspect I'm looking for here is like what do games do that or can you characterize what
Well,
a
no, yeah,
really
there's
great game does?
it gets deeper, right? So
Yeah.
over time, I crossed the threshold, got lost, and started to piece a few things together. Started to make other software, and started to get into user centric design, and then eventually this holistic practice of user experience. And that started to help me make more sense out of all the things I was building. And then also getting into making comics and just the idea of a game is this mechanism that has a conversation with who is consuming it. And so it's like I make if different art does this at different levels. I don't believe that there's any passive medium, because you are participating with your mind, your eyes, your hands, or whatever, in some way, shape, or form. There's some involvement, and the act of being involved with a creative medium has the chance of causing experiences. And that's like building a weird ship in a bottle, where it's like, how do you have this ghost of feeling transmit from, your ideas into this medium and stuff? And I think maybe it's more direct with other art, but games, it's this big, it's fascinating mechanism that you just sort of set in front of in front of a player, and now they're often interacting, and there's something about the variety of stuff and the conversation, the choices that weave back and forth between a player and a game as a piece of artwork, and then whatever that player is taking away from it. Because some players, bring to it like a desire to map it out as a possibility space, where they're going to find optimizations within that possibility space, because they are a what are they called? The runners, the people who sprint through games, right?
Yeah, speedrunners.
Speedrunners.
Yeah.
Or someone else who's like, is this game kind of like a helpful performance tool that lets me have conversations with my audience? And it's a great streaming game. And so like this, all that stuff grows out of this this automation that has all these angles, the music, the art, the sound, animation, the logic, and it's like this little, it's just vast possibility space that you get to make, which there's still that too with other medium, but like it feels like it's intriguingly complicated with games. I don't know. Did that help?
Yeah, it did. It did.
And
What I'm hearing with
I'm
that is
scared
that, like,
when I say this, when I answer a question like this, I know I've shoved my foot right in my mouth before when talking with you, where I was like, yeah, I made a webcomic for like 4 years, whatever. And then I got back into game, or somewhere in there. I left working on games primarily for a while to, honestly, work on something that, this is where I start hesitating. I sound nervous, but honestly was easier. And for me, where it's like I didn't get caught into all these tricks and traps of perfectionism that was plaguing me at the time with making games.
I literally this afternoon had a conversation with a student's parent who asked me if I've ever thought about doing animation. I said, "Are you kidding me? No, that's hard." I'll stick with comics, thanks. Not that comics isn't hard, but yes, it's a different kind of labor.
They're all hard, right?
Yeah.
But like the ability to finish a thing and put it into the world it's more accessible.
Yeah.
And even it's all debatable. I debate myself, and I'm always.
It depends on the project. Depends on different variables. Like there are very, very simple games, and there are very, very complex comics, right?
Yes.
Like if you look at a Chris Ware building stories, that doesn't look like he did that thing in a couple months. That looks like it was like a solid couple of years worth of work, if not more, right? So, yeah, it's all relative. You don't have to make that. You don't have to worry about sticking your foot in your mouth on that. I was just curious, like, what are the characteristics of the experience in engaging with it that you find so compelling that keeps you coming back to do like, and I think you answered it. But like, what the question is about for me is, I'm most interested in hearing what makes somebody get up and do something that is painful and difficult over and over and over again, because it can't just be I'm compelled to, I'm driven to. There's got to be something else. You're getting some kind of reward out of that, right? At least I hope you are. Otherwise, then it falls into like the spectrum of you got a problem. And yeah, like I've even defined like my relationship with comics as a sickness sometimes, in a very sort of glib way. It can feel like that sometimes, but there's also like, and anybody who's listened to the show for any amount of time has heard me go on and on about like all the affordances that make me so intellectually mad about comics.
It's
But
it's
yeah,
amazing and powerful, right? So
yeah,
one of the games I was working on that was a failed project of mine was heavily informed by so much of the capability, the communication abilities of comics, right? Comics is, yeah, it is amazing indeed in and of itself. I guess the thing that like as far as to characterize the ease or whatever, the friendliness or approachability of comics, it's the complexities of platforms and it's not like you made your comic and then now you can't ever watch it again or open and look at it again. And that happens with games. It can kind of happen with games. You make
hmm
games, and at the very least, maybe there's big flaming hoops to deal with. Like if you used like Flash, like or an old version of Flash, or yeah, it's platforms keep changing, and so both in the creation and consumption aspect of games, that is it's a thing that has to be
yeah.
accepted and dealt with. Where chances are, comic on your shelf, it's not going to like say, "Oh, downloading a patch." And stuff like that, which
Unless
that's
you're reading
common with
on like
games.
digital comics somehow, like you got it on an old iPad that's out of date now. But
Sure,
yeah,
good
but
old
but
software coming in to muck up the experience, but
or or like my old comics files that are on zip drives that I don't know how to get off.
ah,
But that's a different problem, right? But I get what you're saying. It's like once it's in print, that technology is very durable and it is, you know, backwards compatible. And
yeah, a lot less issues with that. So,
yeah.
all right,
Okay.
well, very interesting. Should I uh,
Your turn.
throw a question to you? Um, let's see. Got got a couple here. I like the I like where you were exploring, and you reminded me of your approach with comics are great, and how you do your interviews, and actually just inspired me to come up with this one, because you looking at your body of work, it's very much all ages, kid friendly, and like celebrating like big movements, liveliness in like every darn mark on the page, right? Where there's energy. It's infused with enthusiasm and energy, and empowerment of like animals and celebrating all sorts of things like like machines and superpowers, all this kind of stuff. But in a way that it's it's not it's meant to help, right? And in some way and I know you mentioned this before, it's like you're reaching out to your the comics that you wish you had when you were growing up and that kind of thing. I'm curious though, like is there in sort of the list of things that the pieces of the puzzle that are your premise, are there things that you haven't tackled yet that you're that would help you with accomplishing those kind of goals?
Things that I haven't tackled yet. Could you be more precise about like
Okay, so
what
things
kind of
like
things?
topics, techniques, type of character, and you don't have to, I suppose, spoil things, future stories, but like, is there a way to get at like sort of or emotional truths in that kind of so just to add a little spin to the question too, you mentioned how the I mean you've worked on a story. What it was oh the front, and you were revisiting the front a few years back, and sort of your motivation kind of changed for that story,
Yeah. Yeah.
which in a way relates to this question, where it's like you had a space of things that you were that you were inspired by and covering in your creator owned stuff, and so that seemed to have changed. So maybe the space. How is that changing, and
Yeah.
what like do you feel, and like what in whatever depth you can share, like, is there that an old map of like, I've never covered this yet, like, um I don't know, something that again is part of that premise, like,
Yeah, I think I get what you're aiming at. Like if we
transforming
were to
the things
backtrack.
that pulled you in the first place, transforming characters,
Mhm.
and then
I would
mixing
say
that with
that.
how that's evolving, right? Where maybe the guns aspect changing, which is part of the
Yeah, yeah, that
front,
was a big
right?
one. That was a big one that changed the guns thing, and then also the inclusiveness thing. Like a big regret I have about the
Hmm.
front is that it is primarily about a bunch of white kids in a small town, based largely on like my experience growing up in a rural community in Michigan. But like it wasn't on my radar. Like my world experience was narrow enough that I was only reporting from a very specific place. So like the funny thing that's happened in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years is that as I have explored more and more territories through my work and explored more and more like life experiences and the people that I meet, um, and as my skill set has grown, my focus has become narrower, right? It's like
Hmm.
in 2003 when I was writing The Front Rebirth, which is still available at indieplanet.com if anybody wants to read it. Um, Actually, I think the work is good for what it is, but I just think that it was myopic. It had some very very big blind spots that your older work is going to have. But I think technically speaking, it's a good comic. As a matter of fact, I remember one of the criticisms that Kim Holm gave it years ago, as he said that it was almost the cartoonist comic because there was so much technical good stuff in there. Like there was so many like well designed, well executed pages that it's like it's something that only a fellow practitioner could appreciate. I was like, well, that's high praise in a backhanded compliment kind of way. Um, anyway,
Yeah, it's a good song, even though it has all those guitar solos in it. You know.
yeah. So anyway, I took it. I think it was in the spirit intended, which was it was meant to be like a compliment, but also a cautionary tale.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but so in 2003, when I was writing it, I had a sense of where I wanted to go. Like I knew that I wanted to write something for younger people, um, but I didn't have a fully formed theory yet. I had a whole bunch of hypotheses, and one of those hypotheses made it through to theory, which was loud characters banging up against each other in fun and meaningful ways that develop plot and develop character. Like that was one of my hypotheses at that time, and that I think has remained true today. That's like as like a tool set that I lean on, and a premise and an assumption I lean on a lot when I'm creating stories. But other things like the violence, there was a lot of slapstick physical violence in that book that I just wouldn't feel comfortable doing today. There was a character who I still love the character. His name was Dick Courage, and he was this smarmy, sort of swaggering, kind of like an evil Han Solo. Like all of Han Solo's swagger, but like the guy's a bad guy. Like he's like a criminal. And he has like all these guns that talk to him, and like he calls them all like Angel and Tammy, and like all these girls' names. And they all have like these bubbly personalities, and it felt very reminiscent of like how in the old 1960s Batman show, like the bad guys, like the Joker and the Penguin, would always have like a cute girl sidekick who would like be like
Hmm.
wouldn't quite understand his brilliance, that kind of relationship. And so that felt like looking back on it, it feels incredibly dated. It doesn't feel like anything. I would be much more. I'd be much more questioning of writing something like that today. Um, so that's what I mean by narrowing is like by like failing at not failing, but by exploring these hypotheses and being like, no, nope, nope. Looking at that again, I don't think that's a good idea. The focus is narrowing and whittling more and more. And then when you ask, what haven't I done yet? I think the thing that I'm looking at now as I'm getting older and, this idea of like, I don't know how many projects I have left. I'm not trying to be maudlin about this. I'm just saying like, like the sense of time is becoming a lot more apparent to me. Um, I really want to narrow that focus down further to ask myself, what is my like central core beliefs, or what are my central core beliefs, and can I answer that question through writing a story? And I have a draft of something that has a lot more personal stuff in it than what I usually trot out. I mean, all my stories have personal things in it. Like A Friendly Game, a mini comic that I did, is about an experience I had in first grade with a kid who was bullied. Like, it's literally like I ripped it right out of my life and just like, now it's a bug instead of a kid named Pat. Um, where was I going with that? Oh, but I mean, like, this would be like personal stuff that I usually don't talk about, even with like, casual friends. It's stuff that only like my closest friends know about me. And I want to find a way to artfully explore that in my work. Because the way so one of my working theories that has maybe needs to go up against some more testing is that I am not, and I never have been, a fan of putting that stuff up in front and naming it for, this is life experience of mine. Here it is to be shared with you. I have nothing against other people who do it, but it's not something I'm terribly comfortable with. I am much happier dressing up those ideas through other characters and exploring the idea in the safety of pretend. Right? So, like, does that make sense?
It very much makes sense.
Yeah, I don't want to do a literal retelling of certain life events of mine with other characters. I want to find out what those moments mean to me and how they helped shape me, and how can I fictionalize that and use those experiences to make a story that is deeply personal to me. But you don't necessarily need to know that in order to enjoy it. Like, that's my taste. It could be, and I've had a couple friends tell me that I should do some autobio stuff, because there's certain stories that I've shared about, my childhood, my teen years, and my early adulthood, and they think that they are worth sharing. I appreciate the signal. I don't necessarily give it a lot of regard yet. It could be that is something that I should do someday. I don't know. Right now, I'm saying no. Right now, I'm still trying to work on that idea the way I always have with the time worn and tested theories that I built in my 20-something years doing this stuff. Did that answer the question?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the unexplored space has it's that finding new ways to channel the personal experience, and but in a way that you find that works for you. I can very much understand and identify with that, and that's and honestly, and not in the way of I mean, we just happen to share similar biases, right? I mean, we became friends through this project, and even started collaborating. I mean, how all that works out is like, well, we share similar biases and interests and whatever. That yeah, so I get that. That's interesting that would be the unexplored thing, and makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And the focusing, that's really interesting. So I suppose it's like you're tuning in and building, right? I mean, because otherwise, I mean, I guess if you're not doing that kind of tuning in and emphasizing and focusing, you're not. It's you're just kind of not benefiting from like all this discovery. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, each project becomes more and more personal because because I've tested these different ideas. I have a clearer sense of what feels correct and true to me. Right now, I'm doing this Baron von Bear mini comic during October for Mini Comics Month, and there was a moment when I was working on the sticky note thumbnails, and I had the Baron actually hit a character, like he struck him, and he even says like, "I'm sorry, I have to do this, but," and he strikes him. And the moment I finished the last time, I was like, "No, no, 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 that is wrong. There is another way to do that, right?" Like, and I never set out with any kind of like declarative statement that, oh, he's a pacifist. I never thought that he was. It's just that the thought of him doing that felt so antithetical to what I try to do with my stories, especially my stories for young people, that Yeah, the moment the idea came out of my head, I was like, no, nope, nope. That we've already proven that idea is false. Figure out a different solution.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it with each project, I get closer to whatever is. I feel like, well, I think I said it. It's like you're just getting to understand yourself a little bit more. Hopefully,
Well, and there's a combination effect there, and then channeling that into like informing choices, what you're putting into the next project, instead of saying like, well, I know what I'm comfortable with, and you keep rolling, and that's I guess it's funny in small ways. I'm dealing with that with the game I'm working on as well, because it's in its current draft. It has brawling aspects. I love brawling games. It's not like I want to like exit my house and then swing my arms and punch everything as I go down the street, because like who knows, maybe a ham will fall out of a mailbox, maybe whatever.
mm-hmm,
It's like the
mm-hmm.
world doesn't work that way. I don't believe in that, yet boy do I love games that do that.
Right, right,
and
yeah.
and then it's like, how can I engage with that differently, and
Well,
find a different.
and it also depends on what the context is too, right? Like, so we've both seen Solo, yes?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm going to spoil one little moment of Solo. It's not a big deal, but there's a part in Solo where, in these Star Wars prequel movies always have to do this. Where they have to refer to the original trilogy, something that was said offhandedly in the
Oh.
original trilogy. Chewbacca rips a guy's arms off in Solo, and it was a triumphant moment for me. Like, I was so happy when he did that, right? It's because of the context of why he was doing it, right?
Right.
Like, when he did it, I was like, yeah, that for that guy, you know?
It,
So,
it's like it is making true moments, and like what goes into a true moment in a story, that is that's a puzzle. That's an interesting challenge to deal with
right.
as a creator. Right,
Yeah.
because in a way, it's like if Chewbacca didn't deserve to do that, if that person did whatever, if there was something that made that kind of betray the essence of the character or the story, then I doubt that would have felt so awesome,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and
Yeah.
or like if coming at it, let's see, coming at it from a different perspective, maybe it still would have felt pretty good. I don't know, right? Because if you're like, yeah,
Right, right.
Chewbacca's big, that's so fun. Look at him
But
go.
it passed a lot of tests for me,
Yeah.
right? Like that when that happened, I felt such delight, and my next thought was like, why does this make me so happy? That's a very
Why?
violent thing that just happened, but that made me
Yeah.
so happy. So I thought really hard about it. I'm like, well, they did this and this and this, and so when that happened, it felt like it was a deserving, appropriate moment that still delivered humor in a way that relieved a lot of pain that was happening in the story earlier. So, um, anyway,
Mhm.
so yeah, this isn't to say that like I've got this blanket statement saying no violence can happen in my stories, because as you point out, there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of action in my stories. But like I've one of the things I've learned about myself as a storyteller is that if I resort to a punch, I better make sure I've exhausted all other options, because I need to prove that that is the only appropriate way to solve this problem. And if I can find another way to solve that problem that doesn't use that, I'm going to try it. And it's like a reflex now. That wasn't a reflex before, because the front rebirth is full of physical violence. The Replacements was a webcomic I did with Sarah Turner back in 2003 to 2005. How many pages was it? It was like 250 pages or something. I mean, that comic has a guy who has sunglasses, and when he lifts them, chains with hooks come out of his eye sockets and rip people up. Like I drew that, right? I did it tastefully off panel. But like there was a time where I was like, this was a hypothesis that I presented in a work, and I look back on it and I'm like, whew, I don't know about that. But I've had young people, like some of my students, find that comic and they show me that. I'm like, Jersey, did you draw this? Yeah, yeah, I did. I was once young and cool. I had a leather
Yes.
jacket and everything. So,
Well, that's
do you want to kick over to the second half of the show and take some questions from the leaners?
yeah, I think we should, because we
Okay,
got a lot of great questions, and be nice
we
to get through a few
did.
of them.
Yeah, yeah. It's only gonna be a couple. Well, we'll do our best. But okay, so in a minute and 30 seconds, we're going to come back. We're going to answer some questions from you guys, the people who support us on this thing called Patreon. As a matter of fact, I'm going to spend a minute and 30 seconds talking about that thing called Patreon. We got to thank some people who make the show possible, and those people are the folks who contribute at patreon.com/leanintoart. It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote, $1 a month, whatever you can afford, and you can cancel it any time. You can just do a couple months. You can do a one-time thing. You say, hey, I'm just going to pledge for this month, and then I take a couple months off, take a year off, whatever you can afford. And I'm going to thank 5 people who've been doing exactly that. First up, we got Greg Horvath. Greg, I apologize for mispronouncing your name 2 episodes ago when we did the rebroadcast episode. I said Hovarth, I think. It's Horvath. And you can find Greg on Twitter at IGMHORV77. Thank you, Greg, for believing in us and the work that we do. Owen Jolins, longtime friend of the show, been on the show before. You can find Owen on Twitter at Comic Colorist. That's comic and then 2 C's in the middle, so Comic Colorist. Also, Carrie, Mushin Girl on Facebook. Thank you, Carrie, for believing in us and supporting us and interacting with us during the live streams and for coming up with the idea for Mini Comic Month. Also, Sophie Lawson. You can find Sophie on Twitter at Sophie Lawson Art. Thank you, Sophie. And finally, Metal Witch Sketchbook Project, the coolest username. I think this one and K are my 2 favorite usernames of our Patreon supporters. Thank you, Metal Witch Sketchbook Project, for supporting us. You can join them at patreon.com/leanintoart. We will find all the shows we make, as well as the extra leans, the shows that are only for people who support us on Patreon. And we thank everybody who has been doing just that. It means a lot to us.
It does. Thank you very, very much.
All right, time for some more music. Here we go.
Okay, all flight controllers, go.
Let's see what we've got
Retro, go.
for
Righto,
leaner
go.
questions.
Guidance, go. Control, go. Telcom,
All right.
go. Jinsei, go. Ecom, go. Surgeon.
Nate Marcel sent us a handful of questions. Want to start with one of his?
Sure. Let's see.
Do you want to pick? Because he sent a handful.
Well, picking means I have the ability to answer it easily.
That is our privilege as the people running the show.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I can dig into and what I just some of these would take a lot of let me think. Puzzle. Let's see. So what is I like this. I mean, they're all fun questions. And honestly, I think it'd be fun to revisit this bucket of questions that we suddenly have an abundance of, right? Which is awesome. But okay, so what is your favorite drawing book?
Favorite drawing book?
Yeah.
Do you have one?
Okay.
No,
So
no,
one of my
I just
one of my favorites. It's a nostalgic thing, and it's I really did benefit from it a lot. It has a few different titles. It's by Preston Blair, and it's I've seen it called cartooning, and I've seen it called an introduction to animation and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a book that goes through a few different animation cycles and a few different character designs, and pointing out things as far as cuteness of characters, and also some things that you can pretty easily replicate, like the classic stretch and squish ball bouncing sequence, right? You can doodle that thing in your certainly not in a school book in the corner, right? Who would do that? But it's a little stack of paper, make a little flip book and whatever. And so there's things that felt very empowering about that book and enticing because it was just skillful, super awesome. But Preston Blair was an animator from, was it Disney Studios or a couple different, I forget where his history was, but I had that book as a relative bought it for me when I was pretty young, and I loved it. I never got tired of it. So it's have you encountered this book?
Yeah, I've it's been years, but actually not that many years because for some reason I didn't get a lot of how to draw books when I was a kid. I had to track them down much later, and for me, the one that it's a more recent one, more recent in my development as a cartoonist, is basically all the Bern Hogarth books, dynamic anatomy, but particularly like he did dynamic faces, dynamic hands, but dynamic wrinkles and drapery. I mean, I still crack that book open from time to time just to marvel at the way he simplifies the understanding of how fabric interacts with bodies. It's by no means a comprehensive how to draw book, but it is it's wonderfully scientific in how he describes the physics of fabric on a body and how visually he does it. And it helped me immensely. And I still use it as a reference guide all the time because like I don't have it all locked in my head exactly how compression folds work on shirts and I'm like piles of blankets, like mapping out how that would naturally happen depending on the fabric is something that I kind of either I go to a reference image or I go to his book. So I would have to say overall that one is very, very top. But I love all of his books. Uh, who's your favorite children's book illustrator, Rob?
Let's see. Children's book illustrator. That's. I think growing up, that answer is probably. I'm totally escaping on a name because this is where I'm but it was Where the Wild Things Are, right?
Oh, Sendak, yeah.
Sendak, Maurice Sendak, right? That was always like just like somehow enticing and creepy. Like as no matter throughout the years, I've always felt the same about that art, where it's like dangerous yet also inviting.
It I remember the first time I saw his work, especially that In the Night Kitchen and Where the Wild Things Are. I remember thinking like, I don't know if I had these words for it, but it felt like I was looking at dreams. I felt like I was looking at my dreams, like how dreams can have that kind of like foreboding, eerie quality, but also very exciting and interesting and surreal. Um, it's something about the way he poses characters and the moments that he chooses in his books. But it felt very much like how my dreams felt as a child. My number one would have to be okay. So as a little kid growing up, it would probably be Arnold. Is it Arnold Lobel? Frog and Toad are friends.
Oh,
I love those books so much when I was, and I still love them. I still absolutely they get like a yearly revisit from me. And there's a marvelous stop motion animation series based on his stories that you can probably find on YouTube. They're really really great. But equal to him when I was a child was Richard Scarry. And I say as I grow up, Richard Scarry more and more and more. Why? It's cheerful animals and people clothes and all these wide cityscapes and there's so many different things to look at and there's so much happening, the busy town stories, right? Like there's a fire engine and there's a pig on the top of the hook and ladder and he's hanging on for dear life while there's like a lion who's like leaning out the window while he's driving the hook and ladder and he's saying hello to the mailman who's driving by in his little car and there's lowly worm over there with his apple car. It's something about like it's just so cheerfully exciting and buoyant and there's something about the way he has his animals, the way they express emotion. There's like something that's just stiff and cartoony enough. Stiff and cartoony, is that right? I would say rigid and stilted enough, but still fluid enough. Like it's not as fluid as I like to draw, but it's like got like this very adorable stiffness to it.
it is. Yeah, it's as if the characters are like posed. Not. I mean, they're not. They're like posed figurines in a way, versus like fluid, lithe, and graceful things. And yeah, and there's a lot of cause of it. It's like there's there's a lot. It's like an Escher thing where there's a lot of cause and effect going on, and you can get caught in loops in all those compositions.
Yeah.
Which there's a lot to get you involved with. I mean, okay, there's what Dr. Seuss. I always thought. What's funny is like I always thought Dr. Seuss was. I mean, growing up, I'm like, that seems achievable, right? And there that art style seems like I could get to that level, but then of course gaining more appreciation for the like minimalism and the cleverness going on, then it's like, well, wait a minute. Okay, there's an interesting depths going on, and again, like posing of characters and having like enough detail, but not overly detailed. So it's deceptively approachable. But I mean, honestly, I think we live in a time of abundance too, with a lot of incredibly super awesome modern creators. That and I can see, like, honestly, like the art of Ben Hatke, it pulls in me, pulls in my whole family. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess that would be a another one to talk about, like modern. Would be some modern storytellers that we enjoy. Children's book illustrators. I have to think hard on that. I don't have a ready answer for that, and I don't want to burn any more of our time.
Okay.
That's one we can come back to. Nate also sent a question that I forgot to put in the notes, Rob. Let me put this one here and see if you think this is one we can answer now, or if this is one that we should get to in a future episode. What do you think of this one here? You look at that.
Yeah, that's a big question. So
That
I
is
just
a
saw
big
you,
question.
I just saw you paste. I mean, I feel like we have to say what you
We do,
put
we
in there.
do.
Yeah, I mean, so what would a comics coach look like, and how could someone get your guys' feedback on their own comics? How much would it cost? Is that a service you would provide? Wonderful question. I think. I mean, we've experimented with ideas like that, like paid office hours, that kind of thing, or maybe doing a Patreon level where there's some office hour type thing. But I mean, we've never made that concrete. I don't think.
If I were to do like the very brief summary version of what my answer would be, but like we could probably dig at this for like a half of an episode, I think,
Sure.
is my initial inhibition comes from the fact that I am very nervous about doing anything that comes across as guruism, right? And that's been like a theme of all of our shows for a long time. I don't feel quite. I feel like there's more safety in doing it. I think that because we are who we are, we won't act like gurus, and therefore we won't be nurturing a guru student relationship. But that aside, I think the biggest question is bandwidth, and finding a place to put something like that in our. We got a lot of things that are vying for our attention. So, but what I could see as a potential, like just spitballing, is like, what if there was like a certain time of year where we did that, like where we say like, okay, these 2 weeks out of the year we do it, and then that is a built-in scarcity that actually is a real scarcity, right? Like these are only 2 weeks a year I do this, and if you want to sign up for it, you can sign up for it, and then just I marathon it. Like March's reading month is like kid lit author, like crunch time. Like a lot of my friends who do books for kids, like they're basically visiting schools every day, literally 7 days a week, the month of March, the entire month. So I'm like, well, what if you did like, okay, the last 2 weeks or first 2 weeks of January are office hours weeks or something like that. I don't know. But like the puzzle, the big piece of the puzzle would be like, how do you manage the scarcity of time? And as far as what it would cost, that's something we'd have to talk about. I don't know. I'd have to look at what other people are charging. I'd have to, I don't know. I have to do a lot of different kind of thinking about it. Carrie's in the chat, says, or maybe a patron-only private forum where people could have a safe place to post in solicitation of critique. Yeah, it's a possibility too, right?
Totally. Yeah, and it's you need, well, experiments don't need that much rigor, but we would need to at least do enough rigor so it's a thoughtful experiment. And then if it's more of a serious service, then that takes a little bit more, more digging, more exploring, probably a chain of a few experiments and whatnot. So yeah, the challenge with that is making a product out of that kind of thing. Not that
Hmm.
it's like in a service kind of way.
We'll have to go
Wrapping it
back to
up.
our earlier episode about launching a product and look at what we
Yeah,
said.
absolutely. It's right, and that one, lots has a lot to explore, and that's
Okay.
which is not a great, not an answer, right? Obviously, we didn't,
No,
I
but
guess it
I mean,
demonstrated things we think about such a thing.
it has occurred to us at various times over those 7 years we've been doing this thing. And it's something that ages ago I did through the Art and Story podcast, and it was cool. It was a cool thing to do, and it felt good to do it. But it's just it's the we both have bandwidth concerns that we would have to figure out in a way to manage that, and then we'd also figure out like what is a sustainable price both for us and for people who'd be signing up for it. Um, and if we had like a private forum, yeah, we'd have to figure out how that would work too. Would that be like a different Patreon tier, right, to have access to that? But we are thinking about it, Nate. Um, so okay, we got some more questions, and we got some. Bless Kate Shields Stenzinger. She is the best. Because she said she this morning she texted these questions to me and you, and they're like the gentlest, toughest questions. They're so sweetly delivered, but it's like, oh God, I don't know how to answer this. Do we want to try to take on one of hers?
Yeah. Which one seems the most interestingly scary and or I don't know.
Well, I mean, operative word is scary, right? And there's
Oh yeah.
one of the first questions. She said, like, what is the scariest creative related work or project you have ever taken on, and how did it turn out?
Hmm. Interesting one there.
I have, at the outset of almost every project, I have had very undignified bouts of panic. I don't want to call them a panic attack because it was not as serious as like I know that that's like a real thing that people can experience that are like debilitating. This wasn't something where I couldn't move, but it's something where I suddenly act like an absolute abject coward about the thought of having to do this thing where I'll get very irritable and testy and aggrieved about everything, and it's all because I'm feeling fear of this thing. Um, I felt that way about the Warren Commission report. I was like, as soon as the excitement of working on a book with Ernie Cologne and Dan Mishkin like passed, like as soon as it was like, oh my God, I get to do this, then there was this, I'm not the person to do this. I am not the person to do this. I don't have the research skills to do this. Rockets was very, again, the same thing where it's like, I can't believe I get to do a book about rockets with my wife. And then there were so many times where I was so frightened of doing a bad job on that book. Because it was with a publisher that I've always wanted to work with. It was on a subject that I really care about, and it was explicitly going to be given to children, and it's nonfiction. So I didn't want to get anything wrong, you know. And while I had the help of Anne, who was much more experienced with research than I am, and I could trust her and rely on her, there were at least 3 instances where I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and like I ran to my studio to look at my notes again to make sure I had something right.
Hmm.
Like waking up in the middle of the night, like cold sweat, kind of like oh, you know, I need to look at it again, like as if I could. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking I was doing, but like that kind of fear was on top of me throughout doing that book. How did it turn out? I think the book turned out great, but it was like I keep saying it. It's the funniest thing with my name on it, but it was very 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 frightening because I felt because I was in areas outside of my expertise, right? Um, and I was outside of a whole lot of comfort zones because this is real stuff. This isn't make 'em ups. This isn't fiction. This isn't me getting away with, well, a wizard did it, right? I don't get to do that. Um, so Do you have an answer to this
Is
question, Rob?
it, yeah, I think I do. It's not an easy question because I do think that the the scariest creative related work or project I've ever taken on, I think it's my entire body of work and career, especially the juggling of independent projects and and a day job, a main gig or whatever, right? Like that. It's yeah, being it. There's just many avenues of scary challenge in that. I mean, sure, I've practiced now for some time, but it's still, it's there's freshness to like every new it's like, well, switching main jobs. That's scary. How does it affect my side project? Picking up a new side project. How does that affect my, that's like sleep and all that kind of stuff. Uh, and tuning that is, I mean, so that's an ongoing thing, but that's not as like one single project, right? So that I can think of aspects of all these one single projects because of that that emotional ride. I can think of specifics in all sorts of milestones that I don't know, a lot of them I really can't talk about publicly with job stuff. But like making the comic Art Geek Zoo was a big was a lot of was had a lot of challenges wrapped up in it, like getting started. I did a ton of planning because I thought, well, if I plan, I can take away the risk. And I know, and all of a sudden I was lost. I didn't know what story I was trying to tell because I had all this stuff intermingled and it was really complicated. And eventually I just started and I published one and I said, I'm going to keep doing it. And literally like the two main characters show up on the first page in the dark. And, I think in basically making some kind of promise to each other that's not, is it meta when it's just my fear being on the page? It's pretty direct. And then I figured it out moment to moment and then brought in a collaborator because I was so bound up and stressed about the writing aspect and then worked through that and then went back into being the main writer as well. All that stuff was hard with that project. But then in getting the confidence to write and then finding those emotional moments and practicing like with ideally multiple updates per week, still every single time putting my words on the page scared the crap out of me every single week. And then getting toward, there was an episode that, there was a really strong emotional moment between where like Crunchy, the mystical guitar pick, the guitarist, they're sort of trapped by Crunchy's brother Bill and his band, and their backs are to the wall. How do they get out of it? And then Crunchy's like, I have to do something that I don't want to do. I know it's part of me, and it's kind of like dealing with the violent thing or whatever. And he's like, I'm turning into a monster to get out of this, basically, right? And I'm not hitting all the dialogue, right? And Pick hugs him, and I'm like, and I'm like, I nailed an awesome emotional moment that I did not think I could do, and was scared, before, during, and after. And it's like I can tell that story and still cry, right? And so there's a lot of intensity with that, and it's intimidates the heck out of me, but I think it's worth trying to do, and I don't think I'm awesome for doing it. It's just my own quirks that I'm it's kind of like some people's car gets better gas mileage. I don't get that great of gas mileage when I'm writing emotional stuff.
But you have all-wheel drive.
Sure, I have all-wheel drive, and I know I can probably make it through most weather, but it's still nerve-wracking.
Hey, the metaphor worked pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah. It's another one I can think of is 2007, the first time I started podcasting. Man, I was so afraid because that felt like it felt. I'm literally putting myself out there, right? It's
Ah,
not just because like if you go back even just a few years before that, like on my first webcomic site, I didn't have a presence as Jersey Drost. I wasn't. My author voice was only expressed through my work, and there was a forum, but in the forum you only interacted with my characters. And when my pages
oh,
dropped on, my pages updated on Wednesdays and Tuesday night when I would post them, I had an IRC channel open for the readers, and they would only interact with my characters. I would sit there and play act my characters because that felt safer, right? That felt like okay. And my intellectual rationalization for it was like, well, when Jim Henson did Kermit the Frog, everybody talked to Kermit, even though he was sitting right there, right? The man disappeared, and that's the way it should be. And when what it was really about is like, I don't want to expose myself to the danger of anybody looking at what they see and saying like, that's not good. So when 2007 rolled around and Mark Rudolph and I turned on that mic for the first time with the Art and Story podcast, I remember just like it was almost like flop sweats, and I'm like, but we don't have to post it. We could edit it. We could take out the parts we don't like. But the thought of just sharing my voice with the wider world was so frightening. And it remained frightening for a long time. It wasn't like it took a couple of years before I felt like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing now, and I still don't. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, but I feel like I've tested some different hypotheses and I've narrowed my focus. Right.
hmm.
To answer Kate's question, how did that turn out? Oh my gosh, right? So many positive aspects of my career came out of sharing my voice that way. A2CAF is a direct result. Well, a lot of people made A2CAF happen, but that ball got momentum because of the podcasting I was doing. Give us a channel to make the world aware of it. There was a lot of cartoonists who came out because they heard me talking about it on the Art Story podcast, right? Professional connections that I've made since then. So I don't want to say that every scary thing turns like blossoms into something beautiful and wonderful, right? But there have been like a good number of times where I was like, I'm about to do something super frightening. It turns out to be at least okay. My other favorite story is when I was studying under my teaching Jedi Master, Mary Jo Finney, at the University of Michigan, and we had done like a 10-week project where we were visiting schools in Detroit, and I was teaching comics courses to kids, and she was studying, observing what was happening in the room, and then we were going to do a talk in Detroit about that whole experience, and it was like in a proper, I forget the venue, but it was like a proper like auditorium, like in a big stage kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I was really kind of like relying on her to do the most of the talking. She's the doctor, right? She's the doctor of teaching. I'm a cartoonist who just recently started teaching, right? Like I can contribute if you ask me any specific comics questions, but I'm going to lean on her to talk mostly about pedagogy. That's her field of expertise, right? And just before the curtain opens, she leans in. I swear to God, I know she did this just to give me that push, right? This was purely to like push me into the world of uh, taking risks and believing in what I know. And she whispered to me, I got no effing idea what we're going to talk about. And my whole body just like went rigid. I'm like, what? No, you didn't just say that. You know, uh, and she was that kind of impish, playful person that she would do stuff like that. Oh God, I love her so much. And yeah, we went out on that stage and we did a good job. We did a really good job doing that talk. And like there was like a few moments of rigidity, but once we got to talking about the subject, we were both like super passionate about the subject, and that came through. So anyway, uh, where do you want to go next, Rob? Do you want to like
Well,
maybe do one more question for final thought?
I think, yeah. I mean, this is tough. I don't think we're going to be able to cover. I mean, yeah, the rest of the questions. But the good news is we can, keep digging through these in a future episode. So yeah, okay. Let's do one more as a final thought though.
Okay,
For yeah, episode
that sounds good.
250. The big 250.
Episode 250. And let me just say that if people listening and watching enjoy this format, we're happy to do it again, because this is a fairly easy way to approach doing the show, because like you guys provide us with the prompts and we just react to the prompts. So you can always post comments on our Patreon and post questions on our Patreon, and we can endeavor to answer them. Well, we also have a contact link on linatort.com where you can send us emails asking us questions. All right. So in a minute and 30 seconds or so, we are going to take on one last question for the 250th episode. But before we do that, we got to thank some more people who make this show possible. Those people happen to be us. We make this show. But we also, as we introduced ourselves at the top, we are creators of other things. This isn't the only thing we do. And the thing I hope you will check out of mine is a webcomic called Amazon Academy at amazonacademy.net. What is it? Well, here, I'll read from the About sidebar. The Amazons of legend are no myth. Discovered by the outside world, they've opened a boarding school where Amazon girls and American girls can study and play together, make new friends, and reveal their true selves, because every girl has secrets. And here's the latest page. I got to say, I was happy with this little sequence here in the middle of the page where Jordan is digging for his admission papers, and then Theodora snatches it out of his hand. She looks so dismissive, and he looks so awkward. AmazonAcademy.net, written by Dan Mishkin, drawn by me, updates every week. And what page are we on? What page just dropped? Page 12. So there's at least 12 pages to start reading from right now. Rob, you make a game.
I do. Yeah, and it's called This Panda Needs You. Good news is it's a cute little panda, and it's not overly that needy. It needs you to play a game, right? Where little panda's walking through nice little bamboo forest, some green grass and hills, and encounters stacks of blocks that have physics and colors and patterns to match. And you encounter a solved puzzle. Basically, it's the right pattern. Well, it's fine until a little cloud comes along, knocks everything down, mixes it up, and you need to put things back the way they should be. And the panda celebrates as you make progress through. It's meant to be a really encouraging, mellow game experience. And there's it starts out really, really simple and gets more and more challenging as more shapes, more difficult patterns that you end up needing to deal with. Like in some ways, it's like, oh gosh, it's like putting back, packing a suitcase in a way where it's like there's stuff all over the place. How do I get this all in here? Because you're dealing with the stuff as you're setting the pattern right, and that's what you're doing in This Panda Needs You. And I've seen it. I mean, my wife Kate, she designed it, and we made this to be appealing at it for young ages. But honestly, I've seen people of all ages have a really calm, fun time engaging with it, and it works on lots of platforms. You can get this for your iPhone, iPad, Android phones and tablets, and of course, Windows and Mac desktop. You can get all those links really easily by going to this-panda.com and check it out.
And if you do or have purchased it and you haven't done this yet, a great thing you could do to help the game is to give it a review on whatever platform you purchased it. That helps more people find it. Let's suppose that you are here more for the way we think about things and aren't quite as interested in the stuff we make. That is okay, because this show is a product that we make. We have more products like it at leanitoart.com/workshops, where you can find self-contained workshops we've made that you can download at a price of your choosing, even free. If you're watching this on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up, the video a thumbs up right now helps more people find the show. If you're listening to it in a podcatcher like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts now, giving it a 5-star review wherever you listen to it helps more people find the show as well. And we thank everybody who's been doing all of those things over this past 7 years and 250 episodes. It means a lot to us.
It really does. Thank you.
All right. Did you pick what our final question is?
It's tough because we have some questions from Mushin Girl. We have a question, kind of a bundle of questions from Jesse Kaufman. And there's still a couple more from Kate that I think would be interesting bookend ones. And if we think about this as sort of we're talking about the project that we've been working on, and we do that from time to time. A little bit about Lean Into Art on the show. I'm thinking like maybe one of those theme questions. And I know that Jesse's got a few. Kate has one too. So I don't know. What do you think of that framing?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a good bookend for especially for an anniversary episode too. So choose the wording that you want to choose when we think about this idea of like, what do we think about making the show?
All right. Well, so I like. Let's see. I'm going to combine then one of Jesse's questions and one of Kate's, where
Okay.
Jesse phrased it as, "What have you considered as defining moments in the journey to Lean Into Art's current iteration?" And then, kind of similar, but a little bit, the more like a focused specific moment in particular. Kate asks, "What is your favorite memory of Lean Into Art podcasting together?"
Okay, you want me to start?
Yeah.
Uh, and I think about this a lot. Um, about midway, considering between now and when we started, we flirted with this idea of being more open and vulnerable on the show. Remember this, Rob? There's
Oh, yeah.
a lot of episodes where we like did our best to try to go there. And I know that by the standards of somebody like Kate or Jesse, like we weren't even close.
No. It's like it's going to the diving board on the side of the pool, the short diving board that's not that high up, and being like,
Yep.
okay, crack my knuckles. I'm going to stretch. And then, wow, I'll be right back. And then you leave the
That's
diving
exactly
board.
what it was like. That's a great metaphor. Meanwhile, yes, they're up on the highest boards, like, watch this,
Woo.
Yeah, so, but then there came this moment a couple years ago where I forget which one of us said it, but one of us looked at the other and said, restraint is pretty awesome. It wasn't that long ago where one of us said
No.
that, and it was like this sigh of relief. It was like, you know what? And it didn't feel like we were arguing for our limitations. It felt like we had a new context to think about. No, there are good reasons to not to create some distance between you and an emotional moment. There's some good reasons to step back and take a breath and then approach it a little bit more calmly.
Well, there's part of
And
that too, where
yeah,
part of our premise, it's like we were questioning in the desire to serve and resonate and be helpful representatives in exploring these topics. It I think there's a lot of folks that are wired differently, that have personalities that go into the, I don't know, like nitty gritty personal ups and downs in a certain kind of rawness that I love and respect, but
yep,
it's
yep,
not a natural state for me, right?
yep.
And then feeling like that's fine too, because I think we go plenty of emotional places, and even like it's freeing to not be haunted by this assumption that because I don't necessarily have that kind of desire to share like a nerve racked, frazzled thing in that way, right? Because
Hmm.
I am actually nerve wracked and frazzled, like sometimes if I'm talking like this, it's just
Yeah,
that's how I talk.
yeah, yeah.
So it was nice to just kind of just throw that away. And I don't remember which of us said that, but it was
Yeah,
freeing.
I don't either, but it did. It felt like an enormous burden was just gone because I speaking only for myself, felt haunted by that question. Like, am I being as
Well,
what's the
helpful,
buzzword?
relatable,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
personal,
um,
genuine.
yeah. And is my forbearance like a oh, is it a stifling inhibition or is it control? And sometimes I'm sure it's a stifling inhibition, but other times it's control. Um, so
That's a so. Tell me more about that.
what? Tell you more
So
about what?
so is it stifling inhibition, or is it control, as like a state of just personal a comfortable state to be in, or
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
Uh,
cool.
yeah, control is when I may have an emotional reaction to something and I want to say something in the moment. Then I stop and go like, well, wait a second. Why am I feeling this way? Remembering that emotions are a signal and we should pay attention to these signals and we should ask ourselves questions about, what's going on. And that's when I give myself that distance before I decide whether or not it makes any sense to interact. Stifling inhibition is more like freezing in the headlights, right? I'm kicking back to this because I really don't know what to do in the situation, so I'm just going to choose not to do anything, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. Those two have very different effects.
Yeah,
Like we still explore topics
yeah.
just fine. Having that other have it just with it's a different style. It's a different way of engaging.
So,
Um,
what
yeah.
what's a defining moment or favorite memory for you?
Uh, I think. I mean, let's see. There's a lot. I enjoyed in the beginning going from yeah. There's a creator I respect, and I'm consulting on the project that they're making. Right. That's awesome. That's fun. I I want to help, and this is going interesting places. And then we went from that to um, you know being co-collaborators, partners on it, and that was neat. Felt pretty great. I was like under the presumption, and I mean that was also super nerve wracking because the maybe my CV and my bona fides and whatnot were not. We have different paths, and so it's like I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I make sense as a co-collaborator in this. I don't know, but it was, yeah, that was quite a setup for a lot of really, rewarding, growing experiences. That's where it started.
Oh, that's awesome. Uh, it's awesome that there's so much positive emotion mixed up in the beginning. Instead of it being like, well, it was a gig, and needed to do something. Turned out it was pretty okay.
Eh, no, I mean it was, but the difference is it was like a project, right? And like it is an endeavor that probably had a shorter cycle for me, right? Where it's like
Mm.
I don't know, I was helping get something going, and then I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know,
yeah,
right? Then I go away, I
yeah,
guess, right? And then it's
yeah.
like, all right, I guess I'm part of this now, and that was yeah, that was awesome. So both of them were worthwhile things, and and honestly, it was quite a can of worms. Becoming, I was like, oh, like how do I live up to that? That's kind of daunting, but all right, let's see how it goes. Uh,
Yeah, I had a recent similar experience in like starting out with the Amazon Academy comic with Dan. In that, I was like, oh, I'm finally doing a thing with this guy who I've grown up admiring. I've loved his work my entire life. Exciting that I get to work with him on something. Oh, now I'm gonna be checking in with this guy every week for who knows, right? This could be a 4-year project, could be more. I have no idea how long it's gonna take, but it's like there's something about like, oh, I'm committed to another thing now, which is both, right? It's heavy on both ends of the spectrum. Um,
yeah, I guess yeah. There's a threshold where it's like this is a. It's not like this big permanent judgment thing or whatever, but like it's a seriousness that and a formality that it escalates.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I mean, especially
and
yeah,
and it's literally a lifestyle change, right? Every Thursday night is called for,
yeah,
unless something comes up, one of us gets sick, or you know. But yeah.
Oh yeah. It's
What?
what?
I think we did a podcast for the 250th time.
I think so too. And we have done way more than that, but that's our main
Yeah,
show,
I know.
right?
I know.
That this is our the main heartbeat of this project is this the main show. So here we are.
All right. Well, from the bottom of my heart, Rob, thank you for committing to all of this growth, work, thinking, collaboration.
I feel nothing but honor, deep gratitude. It's awesome working with you, Jersey. So I've said this on the show before, but I know I have grown and I'm a better person for working with you.
I think I am too. You said you know you are. I said I think. I'm so not.
That's fine.
No, it's not fine. I know I am
Another
too.
250, it'll make more sense. You know, then it'll be like, okay, nope, definitely didn't. Nope,
Still not growing.
or definitely up. I don't know.
Still super stunted.
Yeah.
All right, and also thanks to everybody who has supported the show along the way. It should be said often, at least say it during milestones. It means a lot to us that you guys and gals and people of all backgrounds and perspectives who have engaged the show continue to do so and have expressed some kind of value in interacting with it. That means a lot to us too.
It really does. Yeah, I mean every one of you. Where I know that the patrons, they're an extra special kind of awesome. But like every listener and all the different, I mean the tweets and the retweets, the support and folks who participated in different experiments like the quests, which the quests are still out there. I don't know. Maybe we should request one of these days. Request questing.
Requesting.
Yeah. I mean, those that I don't know. There was like each of these things kind of was a banner with different folks that had involvement. 30 classes in 30 days. Another fun experiment that led to a lot of cool stuff. There's a whole community of creators that helped us get that off the ground too, right?
Yeah, Krishna Siddhasvam, Tyler James, Brandon Dayton. Kim Holm, name Casey Van Heis.
Yep. Kevin
yeah.
Cross.
Kevin Cross, that's right.
Yeah, you said Brandon Dayton already, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm probably forgetting someone, and then all the students. Like, I mean, that was a pretty darn. There's a big group of people who were all part of that thing. Anyway, and like all that stuff, it's been. It's been awesome, and I don't know. We'll see what kind of experiments we continue to come up with. Yep. But it's I appreciate it very much. The opportunity to be part of this.
Same here. And this is the part where I say, we do this every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. We stream it live on YouTube and then collect it as a podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart and leanintoart.com. And we'll be back next week, and we'll press on with some new topics, new discussions on this visual storytelling stuff. Until then, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on social networks.
Oh, look at that.
Let's do
a
it
clean
again.
show.
Retake.
Yeah, let's do another one. No, here's what I meant to say. It's okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us.
Thank you.